Hello, my name is Jake. I used to get upset over my daughter Sarah's last boyfriend, Fred, as he was an ex-convict. So was it hard to blame me? I mean, what father would be delighted with their daughter going out with an ex-convict? He was in for drug dealing, and the thing is, she has moved on, but to be honest, her new boyfriend is worse. The first day I met him, me and my daughter and wife and her new boyfriend Tom were having a meal. Tom just gave me a cold stare, and there was something dark and void in his eyes. My wife and daughter hadn't seen it, but I knew he was hiding something. I don't know what, I don't know how big, but I just knew. I tried telling my daughter, "Sweetie, I know that you think you know Tom, but are you really sure you really know him? I mean, put it this way, he doesn't seem to talk about his family much." My daughter cut me off. "Dad, why do you question everything and everyone I go out with? Tom is a very caring guy, and he has been there for me the last few months, and especially since Fred has become a crazed stalker who just won't get it into his head that I am over him and don't want anything to do with him. Tom has told him to back off, and to be honest, I don't think he would have, only for Tom frightening him or whatever he did to get him to back off. I was really scared my daughter was going to get into trouble with this stranger Tom, so I used it to my advantage what she had just told me about Tom frightening her ex Fred. I said to my daughter, "Well, there you go, sweetie. You don't know what he did to Fred. Did he threaten to kill him, or did he have him beaten up? I mean, let's face it, Fred doesn't seem the type of guy to just back off. You were months trying to get him to stop stalking you." I was hoping to find something to prove I was right about my daughter's new boyfriend Tom, so I did some research and typed his name into the search engine. Millions of results came up, so I tried doing the image search of him, and the town, and the company he is meant to work for. I was hoping he wouldn't appear at all, that he was just giving a false name, and he would be cut out way before anything bad happened to my daughter. But my hopes were dashed when his face popped up. Things came to a head one Friday night, when me and my daughter went to Tom's house. She was delighted I had accepted to go to his house for a meal. My daughter went in, and I had just realised I'd left my phone in my car, so I went out and fetched it. A few seconds later, I heard a gunshot from inside Tom's house, and my heart started racing. I ran into the house and saw my daughter crying inside there. I told her, "Get back." I had a gun with me at all times for protection, and my daughter knew about it. I told my daughter to stand back, and I kicked the door in and could see my daughter's ex bleeding to death on the ground. Tom was standing there shouting. I shot him in the head and explained to my daughter I had to, as he had his gun held to my head and was going to kill me. My daughter rang the police, and while I was waiting I saw her on the laptop and asked her what she was looking at. She told me, "Don't worry, Tom has CCTV inside the house and outside. I'll be able to show the police that you just shot him in self-defense." Then I noticed I could see my hand go in the window while I was pretending to fetch my phone, but I had went around knowing the window was open. All was ajar. It was a habit Tom had that was a real advantage to me. I was seen holding the gun in the window to the back of him and shooting Fred. My daughter knew now that it was me who shot Fred, and I had planned to burst the door open, pretending to have had to kill Tom before he had killed me. My plan was ruined now. That's why I knew what I had to do before the police came. I knew they would know that it was me that purposely set up Tom to look like the killer that killed Fred, but it was really me. And it was really me who killed Tom because I wanted to, not because it was self-defense. And I knew what I had to do before the police came. So I held the gun up to my daughter and pulled the trigger.
I can't help if you don't talk to me.
You won't believe me.
If you tell me you saw Bigfoot or some creature in the woods, I will believe it. I promise. Tell me your story.
There were no creatures, spirits, or monsters. It was just me. It was my first time as a caretaker in Yellowstone. I barely knew the place, but when I saw it for the first time, and I fell in love instantly, I was in complete awe of it. The mountains that reached up to the clouds, and the valleys which cut beneath them. The forest which ran vast and all-consuming throughout. And then there was the wildlife. It was overwhelming in its beauty. And people left the park in November for the winter season. And that's when I came in. I was to remain there until the plows could reach me towards the end of winter. I was the only one in my section, alone for miles and miles. My job was to clear the snow off the roofs of some of the buildings and structures. That was pretty much all I was supposed to do, but it kept me busy. There was always more snow to clear. I enjoyed the solitude. I'd been craving it for some time. When night fell, my cottage was the only source of light. The entire landscape, mountains, rivers, and the forest, all of it was dark. It was like an ocean of black, if you can picture it. And a tiny pin drop of light in the middle. That was me. I read books and made dinner. That's how I spent my nights. One day there was a storm. The snow was falling so thick and so fast that I couldn't get past my own front door. I decided it was too dangerous to try going out, so I stayed in, knowing that I'd have to do double the work the next day. But it was okay, because it was better than being caught outside in a storm. That could be death if you couldn't find shelter. That night, after dinner, I read as I normally do, but as I did, I noticed a strange sound. The soft, wet hum. I heard it before, only when I was absolutely silent, but I could never place where it was coming from, or what it could be. So I forgot about it. I kept reading, and when I was too tired to read another word, I turned out the lights and went to bed. It woke me from a sound sleep. I was so tired and disoriented, I wasn't sure if I had heard something or if it'd just been a dream. Slowly I came out of my fog, and then I knew it hadn't been a dream. There was a knock at my door. I couldn't imagine who it could be. I was miles away from anyone, and in a storm, it would be impossible to get to me. I tried to look out the window by my bed, but it was too dark. I picked up the gas lantern and lit it. Then I moved to the door. When I opened it, the wind hit me like 1,000 needles. I aimed the light out, but there was only snow and darkness. Beneath me, though, I did notice something. Footprints. They led from my door to just outside the window where my bed was, then back out into the black. Sudden terror came over me as I looked out over the dark. I closed the door and latched it shut. After sitting in fear for a few moments, my exhaustion caught up to me again. Though I was afraid, I could think of nothing I could do. So I put the light away and I lay in bed. The following morning I woke up and remembered, but I had no idea if I had dreamt it or if it really happened. I opened the front door and found there were no footsteps outside. And though I let myself believe it had been a dream, part of me knew that the snow would have filled in the footsteps if they had really been there at all. The sky looked just as bad as the day before, but if I didn't clear the roof before another storm, the other stations could cave in. I can't express the fear I felt walking through the woods that day. Any noise sent shivers up my spine. I was convinced someone had been there last night, watching me sleep. But if it was true, why wouldn't they wait for me to open the door? And how could they have survived the storm? I cleared the roofs from the other buildings, and as I did, it began to snow again. By the time I started my journey back to my cabin, the snow was too thick to see through. I was caught in it, and worse, I was lost. My compass seemed to be working, but the more I followed it, the less I recognized my surroundings. My feet burned from the cold, my bones shivered. Then darkness fell. I thought that was it. I would die right then and there, frozen in the woods. And then I saw a light. I thought maybe I had left the lantern on, but I remember turning it off. But I didn't care either way. I was glad because the closer I got, the more I realized that yes, it was my cabin, and I was home. The door was locked when I tried to pull it, but how could that be? Unless I was wrong. Maybe this was someone else's cabin. Maybe I wasn't as far from the other caretakers as I originally thought. I knocked and waited. The wind blew cold all about me. I moved to the window and saw the person inside. It was me. I stumbled back into the woods and hid. I watched as the person inside opened the door and looked out, the lantern held out ahead of them. I watched closely, trying to understand. Then they quickly went back inside and closed the door, as if they were afraid. Against all odds, I found my way back to the buildings I had cleaned and slept inside. I nearly froze to death that night. The next morning, I stood in the woods and watched the cabin for as long as I could before approaching it. When I finally did, I found it empty, and the door was unlocked like I'd left it. It felt foreign to me now, like I was in someone else's home, like when you have to stay at a stranger's house, except all the things in it were mine. The only thing familiar was the smell. It was tart and sour, but in my time here I'd grown to love it, and I was home. Outside, the world was frozen. The life and beauty I had been struck by when I first arrived had long since faded. I was afraid of the day because I could look out my window and see what was outside. I didn't want to see. But of course, the day was nothing compared to night. I needed the heater, but it lit the cabin from inside. I felt naked, exposed. I couldn't see anything past the windows. The only thing in them was my own reflection. I lifted the mattress off the bed and leaned it against the glass. I didn't need the bed. I had no intention of sleeping that night. I sat across from the door and watched it. Every time the wind blew and shook the door, I felt my stomach turn cold. At first, I couldn't tell if I was really hearing what I thought. The screams swelled and faded, or maybe they were just shrieks of wind pushing through the pines. I found the lantern and opened the door. The world was black. The light ahead lit only a few feet in front of me. I could see snow on the ground, snow falling in tiny specks, but nothing else. When it came from my right, I would aim the light towards it. Seconds later, it would be on my left. It was in front of me. It was behind me. It was close. It was far. I was terrified, and before long, my fingers began to burn. I had to go back. When I did, I put the mattress back down on the bed. I was too tired. Fear and vigilance had taken it all out of me. I lay in the bed and listened, but there were no more screams. I had dreamt it, and I decided, or imagined it. If it was real, she would have seen my light. She would have seen it by now. The orange glow of the heater through the window. If it was real, maybe I would see her footsteps in the snow in the morning. Or perhaps she would wake me with a knock. These thoughts swirled in my mind, but I knew they were nonsense. I just needed sleep. And so I closed my eyes and did just that. The following morning I woke up and remembered that I had no idea if I had dreamt it or if it really happened. I opened the door and found there were no footsteps outside. And though I let myself believe it had been a dream, part of me knew the snow would have filled in the footsteps if they had truly been there at all. There was no way to know. I looked out over the ice and the dead trees and the leaden sky, which seemed like a concrete slate about to drop. I couldn't face it. I couldn't go out and do my job. I knew something was out there. I didn't know what, but it was there. Between the trees on the other side of the hills. I sat on the floor facing the door again. I stared at the wood of the door and listened. I wondered about her, the woman who screamed. I wondered if she had died in the night, and if so, would she come now? Would she come knocking and ask why I didn't help her? In the silence of the day, I could hear it again. The strange hum. The wet, sticky sound I knew I could never place. And then, something fell in front of me. Small like a speck, but solid. I leaned down to it. It was white and wriggling. A maggot. Something tickled my hand. I looked down and saw another maggot crawling across my knuckles. Another one dropped from above, falling on my shoulder. I lifted my eyes up. On the ceiling, there was the shape of a small square door. I had forgotten about it. Forgotten about the attic. It was too small to go into, meant only for storage. At the edge of the square door, maggots writhed and dropped. Something was there. Something had been there the whole time. That I could place it now. It was the sound of 100,000 maggots feasting. I moved the heater to the center of the room and used it as a stepping stool. I climbed it and reached for the door on the ceiling. The smell, the familiar smell I've grown to love, was overpowering here. My eyes stung, my throat closed. I lifted my head to the attic. His small body entirely covered by them. A blanket of maggots so thick I couldn't even see him.
Did you remember then that you hadn't come alone?
Yes, I remember.
They still haven't found your wife. Is she up there in the hills?
Just behind them. They'll have to wait for the thaw. It was a brutal winter. I tried to tell her there was nothing out there. Nothing but ice. But she ran anyway. She ran for me when she saw what I'd done to our son. She ran begging for help. Screaming for it. But there was no one out there. I listened to her screams until they died down. Until there was only silence and dark.
Why did you do it? Didn't you love them?
With all my heart. Too much. It was all I knew. It was suffocating. Some men shouldn't have that much love. Some men should just be alone.
The relationship between me and my wife had turned strange a couple of weeks ago, and I am not sure what happened exactly. A month and a half ago, my wife came screaming into the living room, shoving a picture into my face. She kept on shouting, "Who is this younger woman you were with?" And I calmly told her that the younger woman was her. She then looked at the picture and realized that it was her when she was in her early 20s. We were both in our 40s now, and she cried and apologized, and we made up. Then, a couple of days later, she barged into our bedroom and was shouting at me to explain the photo of me with a younger woman. I tried explaining to her that the younger woman in the photo was her when she was younger. She had a knife in her hand, but I kept control of that hand that she had gripped the knife with. She then realized that the young woman in the photo was actually her. Something wasn't right, and I decided to go through some old photos together of both of us in our younger days. As we were going through the old photo book, my wife would scream and shout at me in a murderous tone every time she saw me in a photo with her when we were younger. Then she would apologize when she realized it was herself in the photo, and it was incredibly unusual. Then I started doing it myself. As we were looking through the old photo book, I would go angry and accuse my wife of cheating when I would see a photo of her with a younger man, but the younger man is me. I would then apologize straight away. Going through that old photo book had constantly made me and my wife shout at each other and accuse one another of cheating until we both realize it is just our younger selves. We have burnt all photos.